Alright, here's the same big walnut table. I'm kind of doing the final step, little trick I've picked up just over doing all these Rubio Monocoat finishes. Is even they recommend going to 150 on the finish and then doing the Rubios. Well, that still usually leaves just a little bit of grain and texture that I don't like on a tabletop. I want that velvety smooth finish. So what I've done is basically figured out, once this finish is cured up, going back over it with a little old soft sponge and some 600 grit wet and dry, and just slightly buff that hole. I've done half of it on this side. This half hasn't been done. You can see I kind of doctored up some of those knots a little bit. Had to go back over. But something I constantly have issues with this Rubio finish is just once you do the 150 and wipe it all down, clean it up real good, then Rubio's it, sometimes your glue joints will end up kind of popping out above the surface just barely. I mean, it's just ever so slightly. But I've done a lot of research, and all I found on it, they call it like ease out, like the glue possibly ends up curing at different rates than the wood, or just I've found a lot of different stuff on it that hasn't been real congruent on what it is. You know, they say possibly too much glue or something like that when you're doing these big glue ups. But with this tabletop, it was so big, I probably did put a little heavy on the glue, but I ended up getting one of those silicone rollers to kind of help with any of that. But even with all that, I still, with the Rubio's finish, have a little ease out of some of the glue joints when this thing cures up. You normally don't get that with a varnish finish. It's a harder finish, but since I do most of these tops for pets and different things like that, the zero VOC and the durability of this Rubio's has just kind of been my go-to. But I may be wrong on some of these problems with the glue easing out, but correct me if I'm wrong. Like I said, I've been trial and error and research online trying to figure out the best solution to it. So what I've found when doing these finishes, I end up going back over it with 600 grit and then doing a whole nother finish on top of that, so it's almost like a second coat. A real light second coat. But what I can do with these glue joints is actually take, before I do my 600 grit, because the 600 with a soft sponge usually is not going to flatten that out all the way. You're still going to have that raised edge. It's just not going to take it down like something a little heavier or harder surface. So I will actually, call me crazy, take a blade to this and just lightly shave off that little bit. You can kind of see it start to collect. And you just got to go super light. You don't want to really get into the finish, and since we're going back over this with a 600, you know, you should be okay, and we're going to recoat it. But that's just a little trick I've picked up with this Rubio's Monocoat finish and having these little ease out issues with the glue joints and different things. I mean, it's just probably me being over perfectionist, and most people may roll with it, but I just can't. It bothers me. So that's my fix for it. If it helps anybody out there, I hope it does, but that's it. Alright, this is a look at it all finished up. after the second coat with the 600 beforehand. I'm gonna let it sit here and cure for the next half a day or so before I put any blankets or anything on it. But yeah, it's gonna be velvety smooth, slick down. Best way to do a Rubio's finish.